Welcome to Rare Conversations, another podcast of Rare Conversations. We're at the office of Ricardo Amigo Real Estate, and today joining me, and Fletcher Wheaton is with me from Mari, Mexico, and it's a privilege to have you here in the office. Thank you so much for coming up here. You're also going to be speaking today at the seminar, and if you guys don't know Fletcher, he's got many hats, but he does multiple seminars, educational seminars, podcasts, webinars. He does, you're kind of like, to me, you're the information go-to person in Cabo, and you really know your stuff, and I just wanted to say thank you for coming.
No, thank you for the invitation, Rich. Matter of fact, the reason that we're here is to celebrate 20 years of business for you and Todos Santos. Huge feat. I look up to you. It's funny, I told you I got here early and walked around, and it's, you know, it was kind of like you guys and maybe a couple other places started. Now I'm just walking down the street and there's a bunch of others, but to see you go through kind of everything to get where we are, because this is just a special place.
It really is, and thank you for that. I also wanted to, like, we had gone down to your office maybe 3 weeks ago, and kind of did a presentation, and it kind of also, your seminars have kind of sparked me to do what we're doing today, and it's a great, like you had explained it, and I kind of use it in bridging the gap kind of between Todos Santos and Los Cabos, because when I noticed that when you give statistics, you like to give statistics of all of Baja with a focus kind of on Los Cabos, but you're one of the few brokers and that really kind of study the areas, and I think you have a good finger on Todos Santos in this area. You kind of know what's going on, and that's why when you asked us to come down there and speak, I saw it like, wow, this is great. This is like what we need to do a little more of, educating about Todos Santos, and I think the idea was to educate your team as far as what was going on the Pacific side.
Exactly. No, it's great to know all markets, and I learned, you know, there's a couple things that I learned with that I'm actually going to be speaking about today that it took me a week to digest or two, and I was like, okay, this reminds me of this area in Cabo type thing. So, but maybe in 2010, you know, so.
It's a good point. Like I remember, you know, I've been here a while and 24 years here, 20 years in doing this, and the changes I've seen along the way. When did you get to Cabo? Like, give us a little backstory on how kind of you got it to Cabo and into the real estate.
Yeah, so I got into real estate before I went to college. You know, we were kind of flipping houses in New Orleans. That's where I'm from. And then after I graduated college, I remember I was like a senior in college, and I just remembered my father was sending a check to Kelvin Brockbank, a doctor that owned the house, and there was 4 other guys living there, and I said, man, everybody's sending this guy. I said, this is kind of nice to own a piece of real estate and rent it out. So we kind of slowly acquired rental properties like that. So it was always in the blood. How I got to Cabo was essentially my father joined a newsletter, all right, and somebody did like a flash deal in Cabo.
Okay.
So I have no knowledge of this, all right? By the way, this is all like sight unseen. So like when we got down here, he was just checking it out, right? So it's like a Monday, and he calls me up and he's like, hey, going down to Cabo on Friday for the weekend. I bought a place there. It's pre-construction. You want to come down? So I was like, all right, you know. And I didn't really know that much about Cabo. So the plane's like descending, and I'm like, oh man, it's a desert here, you know. So anyway, 2 hours after we get to the resort where they put us up, you know, he's like, his phone rings and he's like, hey, the agent's coming to pick us up to show us the property. That was Elisa, who's now my wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
So it was like a 3-day weekend that literally I had no plans of doing, and then it was kind of a long distance relationship. Now My son actually just turned 6 yesterday, so
Congratulations.
yeah. So we planted roots here, man, but that's how I got down here.
So how longer after you left and did you come back and start and make this full time?
I think it kind of took almost like 2 years.
2 years to come
Yeah,
back
yeah.
down. And who did you, like, did you start with a company? Did you start just yourself or?
So I spoke to a lot of different people, and that's really kind of how I got into content. You know, Nick was somebody that helped me. I ended up going to work for William Scott at Baja Smart, who helped me out a bunch.
Yeah.
But what I did find is when I was trying to get information as a buyer, you know, and since then we bought more properties here, you know. But before I was licensed, I was obviously trying to go through other people, and I just found it very hard. And we're talking, you know, the pre-pandemic days where I think we might have almost doubled in agent size since then. But anyway, it was like trying to pull teeth, you know? So I was like, wait, hold on, like I can't get any information on this. So that's kind of how I started. Somebody needs to be providing information to people.
Well, you certainly do that, and I'd like one of the things that really, for me, as a broker in the market that's just kind of, I mean, we have a lot of pre-construction for what I consider a lot of pre-construction because it's new to us, right? So I really love what you put out as far as videos and YouTube videos and everything that you do on pre-construction. You've actually done a seminar on pre-construction as well that myself and members of my team attended. And what I love about it is that you kind of don't hold back. You kind of tell it like it is about the ups and downs of pre-construction. I mean, you talk about like how people are making money in pre-construction, but you also talk about what to look out for, what to be careful of. And I really think that is invaluable for buyers, for agents, and developers that are watching your stuff can see like, hey, someone's checking us, you know?
Yeah. No, and that's, to be honest, you know, there's been pain with pre-construction, right? That I've been a part of. And what I noticed too was if you're an agent and you have some issue in a pre-construction project, like some that and look, this was an agent, so it's like, let's come together and like call this out when it happens, as opposed to, because what happens, somebody gets involved in a situation and there's kind of like a stigma of being associated, so they just kind of go their separate way and they don't let anybody know about it because they don't want to be associated. And my point is we can't be doing that, because then the person that follows after you, because you start seeing like, oh, this agent led me to this project, and it's like, no. That agent had really good intent with all the information, and you know, it just, the person that was developing that project, they had plans to do this that they were letting the entire market know, and they're not doing that, you know. So, but then it puts that, you know, it's just a bad situation, and I don't think there's room for that. I think everybody would agree in any market, you know.
I think you do a fantastic job of bringing it to the forefront and just letting people know what to look for. I think that's super important. You at the seminar was a great like outline. I think you had an attorney speaking.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Okay,
Yeah.
and he did a great job. One of the questions, just curiosity, right? Like I believe that you'll obtain a lot of buyers that tune into that, but do you also obtain a lot of developers that say, that's the guy I want to be with? Like that guy's he's sharp, he's, you know, he's gonna, you know, keep everyone in check, and he's doing a great job of presenting this. Does that happen?
You know, from that, no.
Okay.
But I think the more content you do, the more you can kind of niche out to certain things. Mm-hmm. For that one, it was more to agents. We're like, hey, this guy is going to protect me, and he's not going to. You know, as a matter of fact, a lot of developers might look at that and be like, hey, you know, there's a go-to office in Cabo for developers that know that they can kind of do whatever they want to do.
Right.
You know, so they might look at that and say like, hey, which to be honest, Rich, you don't need to be working with people that would think that anyway.
I think
So,
yeah.
and the thing is a lot of like the pre-construction now too, it was, hey, if we take this on, we have the obligation to make sure that like the pricing is right. And a lot of times when we sat down with developers over the past, let's call it like 18 months, we had to sit down and just be like, hey, I think your pricing is just a bit aggressive, and we've had certain factors, the election, dollar to the peso, that could be more favorable to that now. But, just because everybody wants to get the project, but then you gotta like, the honeymoon wears off and you gotta say like, okay, you have to sit down and have a sober conversation with them about it. Like, hey, is this gonna work, or is this too expensive, or...
I think that's what I really respect about what you put out there in your content, and knowing you, is that you hold, there's a responsibility that I really admire, and accountability, and I really, I'd like to think myself into that category as well, and that's why I think I'm really like what you're doing and like what the company's doing, because you are accountable and responsible.
And we have this, an agent called me and he's like, hey, I got a buyer and he's looking at these two projects, and Ariel told me to call you about this one. And I was like, okay, well, what's up? And I said, can I just like cut to it? I said, I think that if your buyer actually wants to buy there, that's fine, okay? My recommendation is I wouldn't do it. And I said, if you end up selling that particular project, I think what we're gonna do is make you sign a document saying that the brokerage will not be taking responsibility for any phone calls or emails that come back when that client's mad in 6 months down the road. And he's like, look, I was already leaning towards this one. I said, yes, I would go to that one. And by the way, this is not like our projects or anything. This is just, and here's the other thing is, more importantly, Rich, a lot of people that have bought into developments that are unhappy, and this is what I'm seeing too, some of this is not fat, it's like real stuff has gone wrong, but it's also like, hey, pre-construction, there's always gonna be some things. As long as the developer's doing the right thing and you got in, But anyway, the whole point is that I don't wish that pain upon anybody, including the agents or who they're bringing,
I think it's kind of something that we're dealing with now here more so. We're getting much more into pre-construction, and I'm at that point now as a broker. I need to kind of make that decision. Do I really want to get involved, right? And then I have got involved in a couple of projects, and we just left one, and we've started another one, and it looks like we may do another one. But I kind of like the boutique projects with local builders, people that I know, people that have done it before, that I have a little more faith and confidence. Someone that may not be coming from the outside, just coming in here and saying, oh, I see this, I see this. I kind of feel like a business decision for Rare is pick and choose. I kind of lean more towards the individual and residents, because it's also kind of fits in with our community, right?
Yeah.
It kind of like Cerritos has kind of taken off with condo projects, and the area pretty well. And I don't know if you're involved with a couple of developments there, or
No, we bought in, but we haven't represented development.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, and it's coming this way. It's heading north of Cerritos. I see it in Pescadero, Todos Santos. But we're known as more of a community of sustainable growth, right? And people are like, someone who's been here a while, a lot of people have got that, NIMBY attitude, like, no, this isn't happening, and most of it's a foreign community, right? It's, but also just making sure that like what you've done is, being responsible about what we're taking on as projects, I think is huge.
No, I mean, 100%. First of all, that was one of the things I got out of when you guys came, because I was sitting there, and Aaron was the one I was like, well, both Aaron and Tyson had great insights. Tyson was like, Fletcher, don't do that. Like, get a piece in Todos Santos versus here. And I'm like, huh. I'm glad he was so direct about that. But then Aaron said something, you know, and it kind of triggered that Cerritos is kind of like the Tezal of the Pacific side. And I was thinking, I was like, is it like Tezal in 2010 or is it Tezal in like 2015? Where you have this, and that's part of the presentation I have, is because people are like, Cerritos is overbuilt, and I have a drone shot. And if you look at it and you show somebody, let's say in Houston or Denver, and you're like, hey, does this look overbuilt? They'd be like, it looks like nothing but land, you know? So the reality is, but it's coming and it's coming quick, you know? So when that starts going, and then maybe you have like a bull market, there's plenty chances for people to get, you know, over their skis. And, you know, I think that's a case by case thing. The good thing is, like, you mentioned the NIMBY, not in my backyard crowd. And man, there's a kind of like an old hostel in town. It was like right before the pandemic, I think, and I did like a walkthrough. And I had an architect, got plans, and did like this thing, and it was just like, hey, what do you guys think about this? Man, like I joke with I call it like East Cape Karen, and but like I got like, dude, I literally, some lady started a YouTube account 30 minutes before she wrote like this very vicious comment. So there's two sides to it. I really like the fact that people want to conserve the culture. That is a great thing. It's also a little ironic that those people maybe came here 20 years ago and did whatever they wanted to, you know? So it's like, you gotta be in the middle, because growth is inevitable. And why doesn't everybody get together and have like a civil conversation here, as opposed to, you know, letting money dictate? Because Rich, I said, man, I came here and I was walking around. This is a special place.
It really is, yeah.
You know, like I can't even imagine running into like a mean person. Like it was just a beautiful morning walking around Todos Santos, and it's a very special place.
I think like that's the thing, like, and I'm going to touch on that today in the seminar. Like you kind of get it, and I think that one of the things we're looking to do is like you get a lot of people in Cabo. Do you still work with clients? Do you still work with?
Yeah, 100%.
You still go out and kind of, okay.
100%.
Because I know you're doing a lot of content, you're doing a lot of coaching and training, right? Like
no. So exactly, it's, you know, because I have a lot of people reach out. So a lot of that will go to agents that are doing like really well, that know the market. But I definitely work with, you know, we have a really cool project launching next to Florida Farms. It'll come out like next week. But no, absolutely working with clients.
You still go out on tours?
Yes.
Okay, so like when you get a client and you just say, you know what, let's go up to Pescadero, let's go up to Todos Santos. I think that's more of a fit. Does that happen? Like, that's kind of what we're looking to do. We're not, you know, there's a certain, I think, profile that might have, like clients might have, like, and one of the things I think that's like, you know, whenever I get someone, you know, I rarely go out on tours anymore, right? Unless it's an old client of mine that, you know, but I remember like the minute the client got in the car and said, are all the roads like this? I'm like, Cabo. You know, Cabo.
Exactly.
I mean, I think there's a good fit, and that's kind of what I admire. You seem to know this market well enough to say, okay, why don't we take a ride up the Pacific? I think.
No, and so this is a good point, Rich, and this is what I'd like people to understand is Cabo is growing. You know, I can go off on so many tangents here. I ran into a guy a couple days ago at this, it was a celebration of life for somebody that passed in the Cabrera community, and he knows me, so, you know, he watches the video, so he walks up and he's like, hey man, do you think Cabo's overbuilt? You know, and I'm just like, I haven't seen the guy in a year, and great, you know, and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, you know, okay, I'm like, do you know what, let's just look at this, like, that's a pretty big question. Let's just look at this. I was like, hey, do you know what the population is? He's like, you know, and I was like, okay, this is what the population is. And I said, in my opinion, over the next 10 years, if you drop Cabo in the United States, it would be the fastest growing city in the country. And he's like, you think that? And I said, okay, let's say I'm wrong and it's in the top 5. Does that still say in the next 10 years? Now, are there pockets that are potentially overbuilt? But it's like, hey, what is your horizon? What are you looking to do? But the thing is Cabo is getting big, and some people love that, right? But some people, they love the Baja of when they came 20 years ago in Cabo, and you can get that here. So then the question becomes, where do you go? Do you go to the East Cape or do you go to the Pacific? And Rich, I'll say this on camera, I've always been very transparent about this. I love the Pacific side. I wouldn't be wearing this right now, and it's a good time of year, but the climate here is incredible. So in my experience, you can go basically 2 ways, right? You can go to the East Cape, or you can go up towards Todos Santos on the Pacific side. The East Cape is very scattered. There's no anchor. And, I've had this where a guy from Vancouver came down and he's like, this is it. He's like, he literally picked up and he's like, I want you to just, I'm going to take you to the place. And I went out there and I was like, it's really nice. Off-grid, water trucked in. And he goes, okay, cool. I'm bringing the wife down in 3 weeks. Get the offer ready. I not lying. She gets the house and she's like, Reese, are you effing kidding me? She's like, where? She's like, there's nothing out here. It's running on solar panels, So I was like, what is she, I just got a picture of her trying to blow dry her hair and the power's out, or, going to the movies or a coffee shop. So I say that because East Cape can be, and there's places for example, Playa Tortuga, or the paved road ends in the East Cape up to La Fortuna. That area, pre-2020, I might have said man, that's kind of pushing it. Now I'm they're building $5 billion homes there,
It's incredible.
But the Pacific side has so much going for it. And mainly for me, it's Todos Santos, and this is an anchor. So you can go down, you can go up from that, but you have this cool little place, and this is a special place. And it's this little microclimate in Baja where the perfect weather, you've actually got a lot of water here, good beaches.
It's a great point. This morning I walked to work and I'm like, oh, it's kind of chilly out this morning, right? That's what climate, culture, people, we get compared a lot to the East Cape. A lot of people are like, oh, you guys are very similar to Los Barillas, or I'm like, not really.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah.
And you both have water views. That's
that's where it ends. And it's funny because you look at Cabo, you live down there, and you look at Los Cabos. But what is the population of Los Cabos right now?
So as of the 2020 census, it was 351. So I would say it's probably 400,000, and Alejandro, the entire Baja Sur is under 1 million.
Yeah.
So that the entire state is less than 1 million. It's probably close to that now, but
probably around 1 million right now with La Paz growing the way it has,
exactly.
And you guys. But it's funny, because you guys you had said it would probably be one of the top 5, if you put it in the U.S., it'd probably be one of the top 5 growing states in the United States.
I looked this up. Austin, Texas is growing really quick, and it's 2 or 3%. From 1980 to 2020, Cabo was between 8.5% and 9%. But over a long period, and then I saw you have these cities in Podunk, Texas, that were getting kind of urban sprawl, that were going almost double-digit growth, but it was just for 1 year,
right,
type thing. So it's definitely
the steady growth down in Cabo, but we're people up here, and especially people that have been here, one of our biggest selling markets are people that are I got to get out of here, it's just growing too much. And when people ask me, where do you think we are? Do you think where are we on the growing stage? And I'm like, honestly, you may not want to hear this, because some of the people are I'm we're kind of at our initial stage.
Yeah.
We're still kind of in kind of the, what I'll call an infancy, kind of that we're just starting. And I know people don't like to hear that. And sometimes it's even hard for me to see that, because I've been here so long, I'm like, how can we just be starting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to step outside and really see objectively. But it's true, like you had mentioned Cerritos, if you did an overhead and like of Cerritos, you're right, there's like almost 3,200 properties in Cerritos. If you looked at the map of how much has actually been developed, to me it seems like, wow, but you're right, to someone outside, it's not, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same way like when someone from California or one of the coastal markets up in the US or Canada come down here and they're like, this is cheap. And I'm like, you think? You know,
Yeah.
and it is.
This house has doubled in value in 3 or 4 years, but you know, for somebody coming from that, you know, my father went to Stanford, and he's like, man, he loves the Pacific side too. We bought a piece of property from
Rick Kessler.
Yeah. And it's done really well. In the future, we'll do something with it.
I mean, you haven't even built on it. Like, you've just sat on that and paid
pure
property.
land
Yeah.
banking right now.
And
my father shared that. He's like, man, this is like California in the 60s.
Yeah.
You know, so I was like telling somebody that, and I'm like, man, I wasn't even alive then. Like, how can I explain? I'm like, man, it's like the 60s in California. They're like, dude, you know. But I can see it just because you really, you know, it's just like, honestly, there's some projects that are coming in too. So if you thought Todos Santos is on the map right now, you know, give it 10 years.
It's significant, and it's like, the thing is that, you know, you can either embrace it or like be in fear, right? And to me, it's like, if it's gonna happen, let's be responsible about it. I remember, you know, when I first came down here, people are like, you know, I remember my family being like, where are you going? Like, what? You know, when I moved from the East Coast to the mountains of Colorado, people wanted, you know, they were like, what's going on here?
Yeah,
what, you know?
Crisis.
Yeah,
You know?
when I moved down here, it was like literally they wanted to do an intervention, right? But when I came down here, there were a lot of people from California, and I hadn't been, you know, subjected to like people like saying, oh, this was like Southern California in the 60s, like you said,
Yeah.
right? To me, it was like the idea of like, it was more family oriented. It was like growing up in the 70s, for me, that's what it felt like. That, like, just, you know, I don't have to lock my door. It's a tight-knit community. It's just one of those.
No, man, it's like, I just got breakfast, and it reminded me when I was like living in Colombia, where, you know, you sent me a text, you're like, hey, we're here. And I'm like, you know, trying to get them to, you know, in the States, there's like, they're trying to get you to pay to kick you out for the next one, you know? I'm like, hey, is there anyone here where I can, you know, pay the bill, you know?
It's true. I mean, we are still really small town living, and that's what I still love about it, you know? For me, there's plenty to do. You know, we're more of a lifestyle activity kind of base. We don't have nightlife, but it's to me, it's still that, like, waking up in the morning in this place, it's still magical, and there's just something about it. I want to kind of get in, because your content, and you've built up a lot over social media, YouTube, and, you know, you're out there a lot. You put yourself out. How many reels or how many videos do you think you're doing now?
So I do a lot now, but when I started, so this is interesting for, like, especially agents. I started writing articles, and I'm not like a very gifted or talented. It's painful, but I just chose that medium. And I would like pay, you know, I think I was a college student, you know, on Fiverr to edit it. You know, and it was good, but I would do this, and I would post them up. It'd be a good story, you know, like, you know, 5 reasons to buy in Cabo. But it was done well. I put a lot of work into it. But it would literally be a 2-week process, and I'd put it up, and like 7 people saw it. I'm like, man, there's got to be a better like return here. So my friend that works in commercial real estate, he's like, man, you live in a beautiful place. He goes, why don't you just take that article and do a video on it? I was like, okay. So I started doing that. But here's the thing, Rich, is I think I did that for a year without really much, you know? So people were, and it was much less competitive then on, let's say, like a platform like YouTube. So I was still getting more attention, but it wasn't like necessarily financially getting anything. Like, you know, I wasn't getting the buyers yet. And I say that because I have agents and they, like this one guy I worked with, it's kind of saying that he's doing all this work, and I threw down these magnets. And I said, man, when I first got here, I was in Walmart handing out these magnets for property management. So like it takes a bit of time. So if you do this for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 3 months, and you expect that all of a sudden you're going to be at the top of the game, or people are going to know you, or things like that, it takes a while. So,
How long have you been doing this in Cabo?
Really, probably like content-wise, about 6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
And selling property?
Well, the same time here, really,
Same
for
time,
the most
okay.
time. But like I said, real estate goes back almost 20 years for me.
But in 6 years, you've really, I mean, you've got, you must have several followers on your video and who are subscribing to you. I mean, I tune into you kind of and I know a lot of my agents tune in as well, because you're giving some really valuable information for the market, and also some real stuff, like real information.
No, so this is like something, there's a place that I really like in the East Cape. And I brought a buyer there, and I was like, man, I don't want anybody else to know about this place. So I'd be like, man, I can't do a video about this. So, it's like
one of those.
Have to like come to me to get this knowledge.
It's like one of those.
And when I think like that, it's like a lose-lose.
Yeah.
So when you share what you know, with you, man, it's awesome to sit down with you and then have you guys come down to the office and just kind of pick your brain. For example, it was great. I asked you, Rich came to the office and I was like, hey, what are the tourist traps in Todos Santos? And you were like, man, I don't think there are any.
No,
and I was sitting there and I was like, that is insane. I was like, because in Cabo, they're like, hey man, I went down and I got somebody offered me drugs, and I was like, let me guess, you were at the marina. They're like, how did you know? And I said, man, that's like Bourbon Street.
I mean, I used to run an ad, I remember in the Gringo Gazette years ago, I took out an ad saying, literally, it was going in the summertime and saying, we're not Cabo.
Yeah.
I mean, and one of our best markets are Cabo residents.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, literally, people like yourself who have invested in this area and can land bank something or just come up on weekends if you wanted to build something. That's really, La Paz residents, Cabo residents are probably our third or fourth biggest market, right?
Yeah.
And you had said like going out to the East Cape, there's a place you don't want to expose, and I get that feeling too.
And I'll do that now, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying is like people come from this. I have this agent, and it's like the same thing. But I have to admit myself sometimes I'll do it. But like when I'm doing good business and like good things are happening, it's when I'm not in that mode. And that's what I want like agents to hear.
Yeah.
Is the more that you show you're helping too, and actually helping, like the more you're gonna get that business.
And it's a really good point, and that's the other thing that we were speaking, accountability, responsibility. It's something where selling real estate in Mexico can be difficult, and the reputation that it's acquired can be a lot of like, oh, wait a minute, So if you're forthright, if you're upfront, that's one of the things that I think has been the situation for you that's really worked in your favor. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, it's really like, maybe like, say, I'd like to work with this guy. I'd like, and I remember, years ago when I first started, we didn't have Cabo agents come up here, right? We did, they would call me or one of the, two other brokerage companies and be like, hey, I'm going to send the client up there. I don't have time, or I can't go up. And now it seems like everyone kind of wants to come up here, learn the market a bit more. And before it was just calling it in, right? I'll take the referral, or hey, I don't know with that market up there. I'm not, please take them. Now, and there's offices opening up that are down in Cabo, and more international offices as well. You guys have a couple of offices, no?
Yeah, we got Cabo, San Jose, Loreto, Danzante Bay.
4 offices?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you guys are growing significantly and making a name, and I think a lot of that is due to you, you know? I mean, you've really put Mexico, in my opinion, on the map. I mean, and you know, I think like I've seen a couple of your agents. I've worked, you know, I've seen them come up here. I've seen my agents working with you guys, and and that's what I want to kind of promote, right? A little more of that kind of working together, because the Pacific side is going to be, like you said, it's growing. It's only going to get bigger. Let's make sure everyone understands the area, you know.
Yeah.
So before we kind of cut out, and I really appreciate it. I know we've got a seminar to do, so I want to make sure that you stay fresh. Give me a story in 6 years. Like, give me a funny situation, a funny story about real estate in Los Cabos. You showing, you listing, you just, you know, just a kind of a story that you share with friends and family, maybe.
You know, I wish I had like a better funny story. What I just, coming from New Orleans, Rich, you know, I didn't really know that many people. Like, I'm doing a deal with this guy from Utah, you know, and it was a long process, and we finally just did, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna start bringing a bunch of. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is like the 3rd deal that I've done with somebody from Utah, and I'm like, I never knew anybody from Utah, but I have clients from California. And they wrote me a letter after they bought a property, and they're like, man, you changed our life. You know, they come in town, hey, let's go out and grab a bite to eat type thing. So being able to help people like that, but also just, for me, it's so interesting just to meet people from a completely different background than me growing up. So, I mean, I've had some funny, like, ridiculous stories. I mean, I think most of them involve agents or bad clients, I would say, too. But yeah, there's probably quite a few of those, to be honest.
It's funny because that's great that like it's true, and we kind of sometimes I don't think about that. It's you really have put someone in a piece of paradise, and sometimes I just take it for granted that because I've been here a while. But when you hear something like what you just said, it really resonates, because you've just found, you know, whether it be individual, a family, somewhere that's going to kind of change their life, right? And usually for the better. And that is significant. I have someone that works at one of our attorneys, like every time a closing happens, it's like, you know, in The Wonderful Life, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. It's like every time we have a closing, that's what they're thinking about, right? That we just made someone's life.
Yeah.
And it's super important to like put that in perspective, you know?
No, and that's what I want to say too, is a lot of people, if I'm promoting real estate, they're like, well, hey, you're obviously doing that because like you're saying what you're saying because you're in real estate. But I'm like, no, man, you talk about like stats. I love to get in the stats, because especially in like down markets, everybody wants to exaggerate things. In bull markets, people want to exaggerate everything. So it's like, oh, you're coming from Austin, Texas. Well, here's what's happening in your market, and here's the same numbers for this market. So what you're saying that's bad about this market is actually worse in your market. Like, just take a look at that.
Yep.
You know. So that's part of the reason I like the data too. But long term, I don't see any way that Baja just doesn't have, I don't know, let's call it, like we're just talking about how we're 1 million people in the state. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know? So like if Cabo is 400,000 right now, you know, I don't know, in maybe 10 years, it's gotta be, it's gonna be a lot more. And what is that gonna be, 1.5 million in Baja?
In Baja, 1.5 million.
You have more flights coming to Loreto, La Paz, who knows?
It really has. I mean, just the flights alone, and international flights now out of Cabo. I'm glad I'm up here, but I look at you, you know, I look at what you do in Cabo, and I'd say, keep doing it, because I think it's great that you're putting out all this information for people, agents, brokers, and also it's like you've done a lot to bring this market up to a more professional level.
Well, and this is one thing I know we got to get going here. The reality is that people like you and Nick were doing this long before we got here, and like we're actually kind of riding on the coattails, because there was a point where it went like this, but you guys were along this.
Yeah.
And it's not like you had it bad because you're living a good life, right? I don't feel bad for you, Rich.
That's
but like,
great.
you know, I got on like right before it was like this, you know?
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but to be honest, the people like you and Nick that have been here doing the correct thing, I look up to that. So congratulations on the 20-year anniversary.
I really appreciate it, Fletcher. Thanks so much for coming up today and doing this podcast. This will come out after the 20th anniversary celebration. You'll be able to see it on Spotify, YouTube, ricardoamigo.com. And thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you, Rich.